Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
The MTA runs New York City subways, buses, and commuter trains that 6 million people rely on each weekday. And on Monday, board members approved close to a $2 billion contract to expand the 2nd Avenue subway line into East Harlem. Patel is the CFO of the MTA. She's charged with quite the task, which I think is fair to say many would find unenviable, charting a sustainable path through one of the agency's most financially trying periods in its 6-decade history. She joins us here in the Bloomberg Business Week studio. Jay, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Tim? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. I want to start with the numbers and just ridership here. Weekday subway ridership is still 25% below pre-COVID levels. In your modeling, does that ever come back to where it was?
We have a financial plan that's a 5-year period, and originally we were projecting that we would see our subway ridership up to 90%, but a couple of years ago we revised that because we weren't seeing that, but we're hopeful we see an 80% by 2029 ridership recovery for subways. But on the railroads, we're seeing that recovery even higher today. We see 85% ridership recovery on our railroads, which is amazing, something that we thought was going to be slower, our railroad customers, than our subway customers originally coming out of pre-pandemic.
So is there a way to tap into that growth financially, perhaps with higher prices for those commuters rather than here in the city for subway and bus riders?
So, what we have is very small, predictable fare increases that help balance the financial plan. And so we don't want to burden one rider over another. It's really about distance-based and commuters. And so we keep that equitable. You know that we do a 2% fare increase every other year, and that keeps our financial plan in balance.
How do you plan to get that number? I think you said 80% ridership. How do you bring people back into the subways?
We bring riders back by providing reliable on-time performance, right? Our service matters to customers, and delivering the service that we promise and schedule is something that we strive for, but also safety. Our customers need to feel safe, and our customers feel that, right? We've had the lowest safety numbers or crime numbers in July, and so our customers are telling us that by taking the subway, but also our customer surveys, right, tell us that customers are satisfied with the service that we're providing.
The MTA faces a combined $1.1 billion deficit over 3 years starting in 2027. It already owes close to $50 billion. It needs to spend $68 billion more for vital improvements. There's some federal aid that's up in the air. The Trump administration is trying to roll back congestion pricing. What's the backup plan if the aid evaporates and the president is successful in rolling back congestion pricing?
Tim, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that back in 2023, we were the first transit agency to solve our fiscal cliff. Thanks to Governor Hochul, Chair Lieber, and the legislature, we were able to come out of a deficit unlike any other transit agency today. You've heard SEPTA is facing deep cuts, Chicago, but we were the first to say we need state, federal, and local aid, and we got our state federal funding for us. We also, as the MTA, contributing to our solving our deficit, right? The MTA contributes $500 million to its operating efficiencies. And those deficits that we have in 27 and 28 and 29 are very small compared to our operating budget. And we are committed to doing our part in saving money to help ensure that we can balance our budget in the out years.
We were talking a little bit about the base fares of subways increasing regularly. I'm wondering if is there a set area within the MTA that revenue goes toward? Because the base fare for a subway in New York City, it's expected to increase to $3 in January.
Correct. So our fares help our operating budget, right? So 70% of MTA's costs are labor and fringe. And so that pays for 70,000 employees. And then the small fraction is for the non-labor contracts. So every fare contributes to operating cost on our side.
Let's talk about fares and fare evasion. Usually when we talk fare evasion, I think of people jumping over subway turnstiles. And I know there have been some mitigation efforts in place, but I took the bus to LaGuardia on Thursday. It was a great experience, but when I got on the SBS in Queens, I got on, it was like an articulated bus. So, it was a long one. I got off and on in the back. And out of like more than half a dozen people, I think I was the only one who paid. And I was thinking to myself, I didn't know it was optional to pay to get on the bus. What are the numbers there?
So it's not optional, right, to pay the fare. We are encouraging every customer to pay their fair share to.
But there's no
the
enforcement
MTA.
On the bus.
So there's a couple of things that we're doing for fare evasion, and our chair has been tackling this first when he became chair. So on the subways, you've heard of us talking about we're doing fins, sleeves, gate guards, enforcing the exit gate, which is the fare, evasion highway. And so we've made great strides on the subways. We've reduced fare evasion in over a year by 30%. We've dropped that rate from a high of 14% to 9.8%. So we know those efforts are working. On the buses, it's a little bit more difficult, but we're also working there. We've decreased fare evasion on our buses as well in the last year from 50% to 44% because of all the tactics the president of New York City Transit is employing. We have Eagle teams that are on different bus routes to make sure that they are enforcing the pay your fare, right? Our bus operators do their due diligence, but really our Eagle teams are enforcement out there riding different routes and making sure customers pay their fare, or they're getting a summons, or they're getting off the bus. And that's how we're working towards that.
How does that work? Because I heard of a friend who was on a bus and someone had come around and scanned their phone to see if they had paid the fare. Is that how it works? Explain to us.
So right now, what we are doing is if you're boarding the bus, you have to pay because there's two different ways you can pay, right? Today is the Metro card and the Omni. And when we go to full Omni next year, there's going to be proof of payment. And so what you can do is European style proof of payment for customers is you can tap their phones or credit cards, the method of payment to see if they paid their fare. And if they didn't pay their fare, that's something that we'll work with on a summons, or, you need to pay your fare for our customer. And so that's something that's coming. We're really excited about that for Omni and proof of payment. But right now there's two different methods. And so we're working on different ways to combat fare evasion.
I want to talk a little bit about proposals from mayoral candidates. Zoran Mamdani, for example, his proposal to make all New York City buses free. What do you think of that? And does it create a sort of a two-tiered mass transit system where people who ride buses don't pay for it, but then people who ride the subway do, and it kind of offset people not necessarily taking the right mode of transit for their destination?
So we've heard the mayoral candidates' proposal for fare-free buses. What I'd like to emphasize again is fare box revenue is important to the operations of the MTA. It's 26% of our revenue. And buses is about $1 billion in the out years of revenue for the MTA bus, for the MTA, excuse me. And that's important to us. And so we want to make sure revenues equal service. And that is something that's a hypothetical right now, but we rely on fare box revenue.
So you said $1 billion in revenue is what it brings in. Mamdani estimates that's about $750 million annually to make buses free. Is that an accurate assessment on his part?
I think there's pieces that he's looking at just the New York City Transit bus fare. We have MTA bus that we also run that the city contributes to, and that is also fare box revenue for buses.
So what would taking away that revenue from the MTA do to the authority's finances? Or would it just be, look, again, it's a proposal. You said it's something that, is not a plan yet.
Yes.
But to be fair, he is by far the favored candidate. And there are a lot of questions about what power he has to actually follow through with a campaign promise such as this. But this is certainly a central part of his campaign. So you got to be looking at it closely.
We are looking at it. But one thing that I would like to emphasize, right now in New York City, fares are affordable. We make transit and buses the most affordable at $2.90. And it's affordable with fair fares, reduced fare for our customers. But, it is something that we will look into as the mayoral candidate has proposed.
What about mitigating climate issues that affect particularly the subway stations? You go online, you see videos of flooding in stations. Or maybe
you're trying to get home and on a rainy day.
Right, and
in the
there's
summer, and
water in the subway station. Do you guys have, at least as part of the upcoming capital plan, a plan in place to update the infrastructure?
A couple of points on that, right? A couple of the issues that arise in the subway systems are not the MTA's fault. New York City, right, contributes to the flooding issues that we face in the subways, whether it's through DEP, manholes, the sewage. So that is one aspect of the flooding that you see on the New York City transit. But our historic capital plan, that $68.4 billion, does have climate resiliency of hardening the system in certain stations proposed in there for it.
Let's talk a little bit about congestion pricing. Not as hot of a topic as it was a few months ago. It seems like it's died down a little bit. In your view, is it working?
Congestion pricing is working. It is reducing traffic by 11%. What does that mean? 70,000 cars are off the road every single day. What else is it doing? It's moving our buses faster. It's moving people faster. We've seen a change in ridership, but also we've seen safety increases. There's a 14% decline in pedestrian crashes. And on top of it all, it is bringing in the revenue that we had projected originally.
It's being watched very closely, not just by proponents and opponents of it, but also by other cities that might want to put this into practice. Have you or has the MTA heard from other cities about congestion pricing, about the model, and about questions about implementing it in their own cities?
The MTA has heard from other cities and transit properties and engaged with them to have conversations about the process that New York implemented for the successful congestion pricing program that we're having. So they're looking at us as a model.
We have to ask about the Second Avenue subway expansion as well. Just walk us through some of the plans for and the timeline here, because this has been something that's been in the works, something that any New Yorker who's lived in New York for the last
how many years? 40
decades, 50 years.
50. I think we talked about that at our special board meeting on Monday. You know, the contract that our board just approved is almost a $1.9 billion contract to start boring, right? What does that mean? It's starting the tunneling for the 3 stations that are vital to Second Avenue Subway Phase 2. And we are committed to expanding Second Avenue Phase 2 here at the MTA. And we think it's going to be a great service to our customers. It's going to serve about 100,000 customers, in addition to the 200,000 customers that Second Avenue Subway Phase 1 serves today.
Do you have a timeline or an expected timeline?
I think the 2032 was the service date that we have set publicly.
It's a very, like I said at the beginning, it's an unenviable task that you have ahead of you. Some people would argue. I would imagine that you spend quite a bit of time studying other transit systems around the world, what's worked and what hasn't worked. If you could wave a magic wand here in New York City to overcome some of the barriers that the MTA has experienced, whether they're financial barriers, whether they're CapEx barriers, what would those be? Like, what is the biggest obstacle to making the service even better here?
So I think, Tim, one thing that I would say is MTA is a leader, and being the largest agency in North America, other agencies look to us. I think I said this before. We led with the fiscal cliff. We lead with our capital program as well. We have started to do things differently since Jano Lieber took over for C&D and now Jamie Torres Springer. We do design build. We do faster, cheaper, and better. But we're employing definitely different ways of doing capital programs as well as operating for us to be better.
I want to go back to congestion pricing and some financial questions around that, specifically about selling debt off of revenues. Do you have plans to sell debt off of revenues from congestion pricing?
So, as you know, the congestion revenue is dedicated to the 20 to 24 capital program. It is expected to generate $15 billion for that program. And once we see a stable market in the revenues coming in, we do plan to issue debt. We've talked about it. That's not sometime until 2026 for us. Once we see a comfortable stream of revenue, we've projected $500 million for the next 3 years. And we want to make sure that we see that revenue and the markets are comfortable issuing that debt for us.
You've talked about fare increases on MTA services. What about increases in congestion pricing, and what is the timeline for that?
So as the governor has said to us, right, it's the toll will continue to be $9 for 3 years. Then it'll increase gradually to the next 3 years at $12, and then in the 7th year, it'll be a $15 toll. So we've already have that phased in based on the schedule we approved.
Can you just bring us, I know there's litigation around this with the federal government and with the state, but can you just take us into conversations that you've had with counterparts at the Department of Transportation over the last few months about making sure that the MTA stays on a sustainable financial path?
So I think, what I would say is the federal government contributes $2 billion to the MTA, and that's a revenue source that we rely on to keep the system in a state of good repair. And so we would continue to want that funding. MTA moves 40% of riders across North America, but receives only a fraction of federal dollars from Washington. And so we continue to rely on the federal dollars that we get, and it's important for us.
But what's the backup plan if that evaporates?
Yeah, we're confident, right, that the MTA and the federal government, the federal judge that is assigned, right, we're confident that we would win that lawsuit. Judge Lyman issued a positive finding for the MTA just a few months ago, and congestion pricing is, continuing to operate, and we're generating the funding.
I imagine, you get a lot of people who hear these numbers. Congestion pricing is on track to raise $500 million. They say, wow, that sounds like a lot of money. Why are the subways still the way that they are? Delays, crime, uncleanliness. Help us just understand. I know that you said that a lot of those fares go towards paying workers, but a number like this, a number like $500 million, what does it mean in the context for the broader MTA organization? Is that a lot of money?
So I'll give you context. Our operating budget every year is about $20 billion, right? That is to run subways, buses, commuter rails, and the services for 6 million commuters every day. But in order for us to keep that system running, you have to maintain it, right? And so $68.4 billion, a good majority of that funding is to keep it in a state of good repair. That means new rail cars, new buses, new signal upgrades, track maintenance, and everything else that goes with operating a system that's so vast in size. So $500 million is just one stream of revenue that generates, when we leverage it, $15 billion to continue with the capital side of the world, but the operating side has different funding sources. But we're confident that we move 6 million customers every single day, and we're happy to do that safely.
Jay Patel, CFO of the Metropolitan Transit Authority, joining us here in the Bloomberg Business Week studio.